name is Filip Orrby, and I'm a VFX Supervisor.
And my name is Guillaume. I'm a lighting discipline supervisor at GoT Kansas.
That's who we are. So our studio is around 140 employees, and we have 4 locations. Our main headquarters is in Stockholm, Sweden, but we also have an office in London, Belgrade, and we're starting up an office in Mumbai. And yeah, we have awards, I guess. So what do? We do cinematics, film and TV, episodic work, real-time, and virtual production. So a little bit of everything, I would say. But the trailer we're going to talk about today is a pre-rendered game cinematics. And we do a lot of face work, character work. That's kind of what we're known for in the cinematic realm. So here you can see a few examples of this from past trailers. And so this cinematic is a cinematic for a game that's based in the Game of Thrones universe. It's a real-time strategy game. And we will play the trailer we made first to get some context.
You may think you know how the game is played. But this is not the game you know. This is your legacy. You decide who wins and who dies. Game of Thrones. War for Westeros. You really think a crown gives you power?
Excellent. Thank you. So our client is Playside Studios, and there were 37 shots. And yeah, we delivered November 2024, it should say. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the crowd workflow. From an FX point of view, we had like 2 challenges. It was the crowd and all the atmospherics, but I'm going to cover the crowd workflow. And then Guy will go into lighting workflow. And so everything starts with storyboards. There is a lot of departments involved before you can even start anything. But storyboards lay the foundation for how the shots are laid out, and it helps every department, basically. And then we move on to concept work. Here we can get like a sense of the scale of the crowds and all the effects and everything we need to know. So it informs both us and the client, so to say. And after that, the next step would be going into previs, and we use both Unreal and Blender and multiple softwares for prevising. And this was made in Unreal. And here we get a pretty good sense of the shots pretty early on, the amount of characters, the mood, everything. So this helps a lot to kind of do the trailer one time before you even start. You get sign off from the client. So it has served us well, this workflow. And after that, when everything is a little bit more set, we move into mocap and stunt twist, we call it. So it's like a training pass where the director can choreograph the acting and set up all the scenes, and then we mocap both the hero animation, as you see on the top left, but also in this case a lot of crowd clips or crowd motions, all the stuff we need, several variations of different types of stuff like running, fighting. Basically running and fighting, but there is a lot of different variations within that. So one thing I think works pretty good is to have at least 7 variations for each type of clip, and then don't stray too far with the variation. Just film one clip 7 times, and we'll get enough variation. So that kind of works out, so you don't get twinning and problems in shots that clips look too similar, or you have too few clips, so they cannot loop, or yeah. And here there is some crowd breakdowns from the BTS, so you can see a little bit before and after, some play blast from Houdini, and then the final shots. And here is a little bit more of that. You can even see the animation coming in there for the hero characters in the foreground. So the gray characters in the foreground on screen right, that's hero animation, so to say, and all the colored white, green, and red, these are crowd characters. There is a little bit of a mix and match between crowd and hero animation. Here's another example. So the foreground is hero characters, polished, full CFX rig, all of that stuff. And the crowd characters are a bit more lightweight, obviously. So we used Houdini 19.5 for this project. And we have like a SOP 2 Solaris workflow. And we did 6 crowd agents, 223 motion clips, and about 15 crowd shots. So let's go through the agent creation steps. And you can see them on screen here. So I will go through all of them and then talk a little bit about shot creation. So we have 6 agents, as I said, the Lannister, the Stark, the Unsullied, and 3 white characters. And you can see an example of these here, some of them. And they are around 50,000 polygons each, give or take. So we start with importing the FBX files for each character, and it contains the geo, the skeleton. One point here is that the skeleton is quite lightweight, which help with the data and performance, so that's quite important, I would say. And you see some naming of the skeleton there. And yes, then we straight away move into material thing, because we move all of this over to Solaris later. And so all characters we make as a high-res version and then as a crowd version. And the crowd version is basically just the high-res version, but less polygons. So we don't make like double look devs or anything like that. We just make one, and then we have a lower-res variant of that kind of. So here I'm transferring all the material paths from the high-res guy you can see on the screen. It's a lot more polygons. So I get all the material paths stored on the crowd character. So later on in Solaris can apply the correct shaders to the correct geometries. And that's what's going on here. And then blend shapes is a little bit of an interesting topic when it comes to crowds. They're a little bit cumbersome to set up, but they are good to know how to do. So here we can see, whoops. Yeah, so here we have a face that's being blend shaped. And then that one is being merge packed, and then that one is being added into a character blend shape add node for the head in this case. And the point of this is, as you will see a bit later here, is that onto the skeleton you can add these blend shapes as blend shape channels with this character blend shape channel node. So in this case, I have a head blend shape and then the eyes as blend shapes. And you see the channels are being added there. And after that, the agent from rig is used. And then you have like an agent, but the agent has these blend shape channels inside of it. So here I demonstrate that a bit in a test scenario. So here is an agent, and they have these channel names, and then you can do blend shapes on the agents. So in this case, we are changing the head shape, but you can use this for a lot more, like expressions and stuff, and control that with Vex a bit later in the shot creation. So blend shapes can be useful to add into crowd agents like this. Yes, and then we move into layer creation, and I take the approach that I just make all the names of all the geometry pieces into layers. I don't bother setting up layers in the agent stage because I don't want to go back and set up new layers if something changed. I'll deal with all the layering later on in the shots basically. So all geometries become a layer. And yeah, cloth, that's kind of a big thing to set up. Luckily enough, as I said, we have a high-res version and a low-res version, so I could just basically copy everything from our CFX department and change a little bit of the selections and fiddle around with it. But I get most of the cloth setup, so to say, the vellum part, and here you can see the seam and mesh is being created in this colors here. And here on the left, you see the actual vellum setup. So we can kind of reuse that a little bit, which is helpful. And then all of that goes into a vellum pack. And then when these layers are created, so to say, you need to add them to the agent. And here on the GIF, you can see what I mentioned before, like every geometry is a layer. So yeah, so like the armor, the body, everything. So I can combine whatever I want at a later stage. But here we add all the layers into the agent. And this is basically the same thing, but we're adding the cloth into the agent as layers as well. And yeah, the collision mesh and a simpler cloth setup there with only the cape. So like 2 cloth setups for this character. Yes, and then we go into animation clips. And we have a lot of animation clips basically. And the naming convention here is kind of important. So on the left-hand side, you can see we have like charge, STA stands for Stark, SW stands for sword. So all of these naming conventions like charge, unsullied, spear, these are used later to add the right props to the clips basically. Yeah, we have this create motion clip node that kind of takes care of importing and caching all of the FBX animations into motion clips, and you can kind of choose if you want to extract locomotion and do tweaks to it. So yeah, cache on farm, cache locally. Here you can select which one you want to work on. So there's basically one node for each clip. So if you need to fiddle around and do something, you can do it here, and then save it out as a motion clip. And here we add all of these motion clips. And these are packed geos, so they're very easy to add. With this agent clip has this setting, treat packed primitives as inputs. So this big mess on the left is just all the motion clips for this specific character, 61 in this case. They are added into the agent. And then we add props into the agent. And one useful thing here is that we have a prop joint. So it's quite easy to just add them to the correct joint. And then we do the agent prep, which is kind of the final step, I think, more or less, where you set up these angle planted offset things that will later work in the solver to do foot planting correctly. Yeah, and then on the left is a small control panel just to save and version and create foot plants and all this for all these agents. After that is done, save down on disk, publish HDA. That becomes, like the agent becomes a published version HDA basically. That later on can be imported into shots. And yes, and yeah, a little bit about fighting stuff. They are multiple skeletons that have to work together, and I guess the key takeaway from that is to use the naming conventions in how these clips are made to be able to match them up later on. And here they are in use, so it's basically points that has what clip they should use, like Stark fight versus Lannister or something like that. And then you make a lot of points with all these clip names, as you can see, and you plug this into this crowd fight HDA and select what agents you're using, and then you can, so it basically spawns 2 agents per point with the correct matching fight animations, and then you're kind of in business. Yeah. Yeah, and here are some more examples of this with the layers being added as well. And this is kind of what I mentioned, like the layers is just like a subnet or nodes that are being plugged in after the fact, kind of. So you can kind of change that whenever you want. Yeah, so that's fighting. And now we go into making an actual shot with all of this stuff. So what I just presented was basically the agent creation and some of the layout tools, so to say, to make this. So this shot was created like this, basically. So on the left-hand side, we load in all of these HDAs, which are agent, all the agents. And then on the bottom left, you see there's like a fight subnet and a crowd sim subnet. And we are looking inside the fight subnet here and using what I just showed to set up this fighting layouts where different factions in the Game of Thrones world are fighting against each other, and it's synced up, so they're like interacting. There are like 1v1, 1v2, 1v3 and stuff like that. So and there is no simulation needed here. Just apply the clips. There is some we did some foot placement after the fact here. It can do sim after all of this setup to just get the feet placed. But yeah, that's one part of this shot, the fighters, I would say. And then we move into more of a normal crowd thing, where you scatter points. You can see on the left, it's at the top, you scatter points. Then you apply which agents should be on these points. In this case, the Lannister army running down the hill. And then there is some post-sim stuff at the bottom where you simulate all the cloth and package it all together before it goes into Solaris. Yeah, so I create a charge state, I call it in this case, and then jump into a .NET. And here at the top left, you can see the charge state is using these type of clips. So charge all, banner, and then star for all of the clips. So they get this type of clips. So there's very simple kind of DOP setup, so to say. And on the bottom right is the same stuff, but applying all the layers I want to have on them, which is, the people with the banner animation have the banner props, and the people with the sword and the shield have the shield and the sword props and stuff like that. And then we move into Solaris to publish my stuff onto lighting, basically. So I load in this crowd and this fight crowd, and then some dead bodies, and then I load the shot on the left, graphed all my stuff in, and then publish the shot. And that looks like this, basically. So there's a SOP import. On the left there, you can see a crowd scene static. So that's just a frozen first frame, which includes, on the left-hand side, you can see it creates instant scale roots and the native instances. And that's like a one frame with the skeleton and the mesh. And then there is this crowd sim anim, a little bit further to right, where I just write out the skeletons. And then I sublayer the skeleton animation on top of that static, so to say, geometry and skeleton. And then they move. And then there is also the cloth, which is more of a normal stuff. You symbol the cloth using Vellum and take it in as a cache, a point cache kind of thing. And we have these form cache nodes, so everything here becomes asset and referenced and using our resolver and all that good USD stuff. And then there's also some crowd shading. As I talked about before, this my material path is being used to apply all of the shaders, which I collected into one asset called crowd shading. So in this crowd shading asset, they are references to all the shaders for all the characters. And then this small script here just assigns all these shaders based on this my material path that they have as an attribute on them. So the shaders just pop on. And as I said, I graphed it into the shot there, this purple node. And under crowds, there is this crowd bodies, crowd fight, crowd sim. And I press publish to shot, and then it will create a layer under that shot called crowd that will be part of our shot USD. And then everyone else can see this, and especially light. And this is the raw render of this shot with the crowd. So when I publish this, light takes over, and that's GoT.
Thank you, Filip. So for our side on lighting, I'm going to talk about a bit more the fights between the Night King and Jon Snow. We had the location with the battlefield with all the crowd that Filip just showed, but the other one is where all the fire, the smoke, and the fight between the Night King and Jon Snow happened. It's 27 shots overall. I've put Houdini 19.5++ because we also used a little bit of 20 on that one for some specific things. And we render most of our things on V-Ray, depending on our needs. Sometimes we use Karma for some effects stuff. So I'm just going to quickly show some concept and then breakdowns, and then I'll get into the actual workflow. So what we realized when we kind of started to work on that, obviously we had some concept arts, but we also had an actual reference from the actual original IP. So we also kind of didn't want to do exactly the same thing that they've done. So we had some requests from the client to do our own thing. But from the previews and then some from actual references from the show, we kind of decided and realized that it will be quite heavy, effects-wise. Atmospherics, mostly fires and all the things that you want to make the scene believable. And we all know that it is actually quite time-consuming to deal with a lot of small secondary effects. And we didn't really have the team and the time to have dedicated artists to develop any effects for each shot. So we kind of decided to use Solaris for a potential effects library that we would populate throughout the show, the sequence, and throughout the shots afterwards when we need to out-direct it. And you can see that technically we have a massive environment that is actually quite optimized behind that, but you don't really see a lot of it because it's covered of smoke, fire, and whatnot. So yeah, I'm going to show a little bit about the FX library, how we deal with the multi-shot light assembly, and then the lighting overall, and some of our tools to speed up the process, because at the end we were only 2 or 3 lighters on this, and we managed to basically iterate our shots almost every day to get results on how that looks and implement feedbacks and changes. So yeah, here you can see some of the behind the scenes that we released, where you see how cool the environment is, but also how much smoke there is everywhere. So yeah, we started to create an FX library, different smoke pattern, different assets, different type of smoke, ground smoke, medium smoke, smoke pillars, using the references from the show, and basically creating variation for that. So here you can see some references and some play blasts that we had for the FX stuff. And at the end, what happens in Houdini is that we load the reference, the asset created by the FX artist, and we in lighting took over after that library was created and started to lay out all of this. So each reference contained 4 or 5 different variants, speed and shapes. And we also used the render and the proxy method, where we could actually check out the VDB in real time, or use a proxy mesh that kind of simulates how the VDB behaves, because obviously at some point in that scene ends up having like 50 smokes and fires and things. So to be able to have some responsivity in the viewport, we had to use this proxy mesh. It ended up being quite efficient, still heavy overall because it's a lot of assets. But yeah, it really saved us because 27 shot where we at the end kind of out-direct a lot of things. The viewport was a big concern at first. So yeah, here you can see how everything behaves for the asset creation and the references and variants. And at the end, that's the graph on the left is kind of how we managed to get our main setup for all the shots, which ends up being a huge layer of mist and thin smoke, and getting that feeling that we were looking for. Obviously, a lot of fires in the back, a lot of embers, a lot of tiny smoke, big smoke covered pillars. And we also kind of started to do the same thing for assets, because at some point we only had one environment artist on this whole show, and you do end up needing some extra set dressing going on. So yeah, in lighting at the end, we do lighting, but we also do a lot of assembly and small adjustments here and there. So we also get some assets that we have on our library, and you could just implement those assets for the whole sequence or for the shots without having the lighting artist. Like some of the lighting artists just want to do lighting, so some people would just take care of that on the sequence level, and it would just trigger out through the shots, and everything would be ready for them. Obviously, the idea was to have like one setup for everything. You can see on the top graph that at the end of the day, every shot had their own setup, and but that also gives us a lot of flexibility, because we had a main setup, and then depending on the dailies, we could just adjust some of the things. And what happened is that we created a different USD layer, which we didn't use before, which right now you can call it Firelight, but we had at the end said it would be a light assembly layer. So it's a step between environment and lighting, where we actually end up adding a lot of small details that lighting artists don't want to deal with, or they want to cash it out. So it's going to be easier for them later on to work on their scene. So once we're happy with the layout, we just publish that through either the sequence or the shot. It creates a USD layer, and once you put this ready to be used, it updates the USD container, which contains every department and needed things for the shot. So you can see that the smoke from the final shot to the actual layer, that's basically this layer. And yeah, the viewport kind of looks messy, but also very representative of what we're gonna end up having. And you can obviously hide a lot of things and work with a bit of the instances that we had in the environment, where sometimes the fire would just come from nowhere, so we had to add some small assets to make it believable. And yeah, so that's the assembly. And for the lighting part, I'm gonna go more into how we deal with the multi-shot, the tools that we have available, and you can already see a little bit of this on the right side. So which is our main HDA tool to use when we start to work on multiple shots. And that's our templates, or how it looks once we are working on shows or shots, where we usually output a lot of main or default settings for the project, which usually is render settings most of the time. And this gets triggered as a lighting layer for the project, and then we have a lighting layer for the sequence, and then we get the lighting layer for the shots if needed. And the same thing for the light assembly, and same thing for every department. And the output at the end is basically, right now you can see that you have a lot of different shots, a lot of different sequences in the same HIP file, which leaves the artist to be able to do a lot of things on his own in one only file. Tiny thumbnails where you can see that all of the shots are handled in the same shot, in the same file, and just press submit and everything goes to the farm. It takes half an hour to have everything on the farm, but still one button to click and then it's there. So how do we do this? We have a set of tools called, we call it the Total set tools, which is basically everything that handles sublayering, context edition, context editor option, filters, and overrides that you want to make on each shot, and publishing the layers, and caching the layers, and then submitting things on farm. So the Total sublayer, it's basically used to be our shot node. We don't really have a shot node anymore. It's more of a whatever node, which means it can be an effects asset, it can be an effects task, a lighting task, an environmental. It can be a lot of different things. That's why we kind of removed ourselves from the shot naming convention. And basically you just start your sequence or your shot or your project, and you just go for the Total sublayer. And we use stage variables for it, which means we can have multiple ones in the same HIP file, and people can have basically different multi-shot setup in the same HIP. So you can see on the stage variable on the root, says the episode, the shot number, the sequence number, and all that. And we use task IDs and shot IDs, all of this. So a little small demo of how that works. You load any shots that you need for your sequence of whatever you assign to as an artist. And once this is loaded, you get all of those shots available in that shot node, in that sublayer node. And you can create different context options editor. So you can end up having the lighting for the scene 10, scene 20, scene 30, but split it into different ones. Or you can have everything in the same. Depends how much your things is changed and how different it is for your setup. And after that, we mute our department layer to not override anything that we've already done, or just to start fresh from a clean scene, which we use the Total mute layer. And we can also double check to debug what's actually been muted, and do it on a sequence, on the shot, or just the task level. And yeah, from there, we have a similar ideas that we already mentioned at some points, but we get a main tree, we get some overrides that needs to be made. So we use a context filter. So those changes are applied only on that branch. And it's by default using the context key that is currently in the live stream of the stage. So let's say the lighting scene 10 gets passed down. You can filter out that this specific node, this light, for example, will only be available on this shot. And once you switch context, this light will disappear or reappear. We have the set context node at the end of before the actual rendering, the husk, where we decide which shot is going to be used for. And yeah, it basically looks through. You can see all the context available here. If you switch from one multi-shot setup to another one, it will read the current one on the stage. I think I covered pretty much all of those small tools, which ends up being extremely efficient for us because we used to not be able to do that because the context option was something a little bit obscure at first, but now it's really, really powerful because we end up having light assembly, lighting, different shots, different sequence, everything in the same file, and we get like 5 different multi-shots in the same heap, handled by only one artist, and you iterate extremely quickly. We use ftrack as well for our system, our managing for the files. So all of this is taken from ftrack for the resolution, the overscan, any type of small attributes you want to add to your shot. Have some small workflow tools that I'm just gonna quickly cover. Some HDA that we made to get some kind of mantra vibe, where we used to have just a small, easier way to see what's gonna be rendered and what is not. So yeah, the phantom rendering, matte. We have some small utility things for GX level to optimize the texture load when it's in matte or phantom. Displacement on or off, subdivision. A lot of small things that ends up being quite handy to optimize render times. For this project, we also use the DIP EXR output. As I mentioned before, we use V-Ray, but also Karma. And that kind of ended up being quite handy at the end because a lot of effects, a lot of stuff that we also want to do in comp, so give it as much ability for comp to do their magic. So we had like different components, beauty and deep, and everything was loaded into Nuke right away when they could switch between each component. Usually mostly deep alpha. We've done some deep recorder for full deep for some specific effects. I think it was the Dragon Fire we were full deep, if I remember correctly. But for the rest, it was mostly deep alpha. Also did some 3D DOF because all of this on the tech side, but also on the artistic side, we really were looking at the references from the show. And we discovered that some of the layering issues we could encounter by doing 2D DOF with so many atmospherics going on. Some of the stuff were actually easier and faster to render with 3D DOF, so we used the physical camera from V-Ray and ended up using different bokeh style and experimented a little bit. Some of the shots are fully in one layer, some of the shots are split every character, and some of the shots have 2D DOF, 3D DOF. It really depended on the shot. We did a huge breakdown to see which one would be the most exciting to use the 3D DOF, because at the end of the day, it's way less work for comp if everything looks right in lighting. Some use of the variants as well. I mentioned the variants for FX, Smokes library, but also for our characters. We had the sword with the blood and different level of blood. Jon Snow, where he needs to be a dead Jon Snow. So that all of this also was dealt in the assembly, and that's something that just gets triggered on the lighting artist, where he just works on his stuff and doesn't need really to care about that. And yeah, we also started to look into recipes, very small and beginner type of recipes, but very, very useful, very powerful. A lot of things are being triggered quickly for render settings, for AOVs, and we are implementing this more and more nowadays on our workflows. And yeah, we looked into new developments as well. One of the things we're really looking forward is the render layer USD option. We're looking into it. It's probably going to be in the next year for the USD scheme. And our submission, which right now is can be improved, where we would loop through everything, and we need one husk node per type of layer that you need to render. Or right now everything is a little bit split up. And yeah, well, Copernicus was also coming out at the time where we were starting the project, so we haven't had time to implement it for this one, but we have started to look into it. And yeah, it sounds quite exciting. Yeah, I think that's kind of it. It was a challenging, quick turnaround project, but yeah, Solaris really was helpful to manage to do this. With the amount of people we had, it was really short in time and resources, and that allowed us so much flexibility to output what we need to output to a level that was also, a lot of people know the IP, so you can't really mess it up because everyone knows how it should look. So you kind of need to make it look like that. And yeah, with the amount of resources, I think it worked out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Questions? Yeah. Sweet.
Hey, super cool presentation. I really liked both parts for the crowd and the lighting. I have a question for the crowd in specific. Obviously, you use a lot of motion clips, motion capture as well. When you lay them out, do you ever run into trouble where two different sets of captures intersect with each other, and do you resolve them dynamically, or do you just carefully lay them out?
No, we don't solve them dynamically. We just move them a little bit and figure it out, kind of. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
For the fighting, that is like for the other, you had the avoidance and stuff. But
Hi, I had a question about the lighting workflow. Could you talk a little bit more about the stage variables in USD versus the context options? Were like the context options automatically built off the stage variables from the USD file?
Yeah. So it is automatically built with this first node, where the context option is becoming an individual context option, and then stage variables are driving that afterwards. So if you get like different multi-shot setup, it recognizes which stage variable it's looking at. That answering your question?
Yeah, I think so. I might talk to you after.
Yeah, of course, no problem.
Other questions? Going once, going twice. Really awesome presentation, guys. Nice work.
Thank you.